3 short years since we formally launched the LKN Foundation, we have made some remarkable progress toward our long-term goals. We've already met several of our stage 1 and 2 goals. Creating and workshopping our self-care videos among people who have few healthcare options in LF and podoconiosis endemic villages in Ethiopia and Bangladesh. And we heard how much people love seeing images that look like them and learning how to make their legs feel, smell, and look better. By including health staff and working closely with the MOH in each country, we contribute to health capacity building and enabling local ownership of the information. In collaboration with course organisers and instructors in Perth and Auckland, we have trained a physiotherapist in the Philippines and a GP in American Samoa in lymphedema management at no cost to them. Our 2023 recipient has already paid it forward, organising local courses, graduating the first batch of 6 doctors, 1 nurse and 9 physiotherapists in 2025, and presenting at national meetings and universities. Our board members are involved behind the scenes, contributing to WHO open courses and running workshops for LF program managers at regional meetings. We've done all this with the support of a small handful of dedicated volunteers and donors who have enabled us to get past this first phase where we have proved our concept, but we need to be sustainable, and that means developing a broader donor base. We invite you to explore our website for ways to support our work and help us continue through 2025 and beyond.
This next section is just to open a little window onto the world of people living with lymphedema, particularly in Bangladesh and Ethiopia, as that's where I've done most of my work so far. So you'll be able to see where and how we fit into the global program and why we need to act. Lymphatic filariasis is a parasitic disease where filarial worms inhabit the lymph vessels, hence the name. The microfilaria are transmitted by mosquitoes between human hosts, and the mature worms nest in the lymph vessels near the lymph nodes, where they cause secondary disease that leads to significant disability and stigma. Around 20 million people in over 70 countries are affected by either LF or podoconiosis-related lymphedema. And there's plenty of data available on the WHO website with interactive maps like this one, a more up-to-date one than the screenshot there, no doubt. The worms seem to prefer the lymph vessels at the top of the leg, where they prevent proper lymph drainage, and the main sequelae of hydrocele, which can be surgically repaired, and lymphedema, which we know is for life. One of the biggest issues in these neglected populations are the acute attacks, and in Australia we'd call this cellulitis and admit them to hospital with IV antibiotics. But in the villages where LF is endemic, there are sometimes not even the most basic health post, let alone access to IV antibiotics. So secondary bacterial infections are common and impose a great burden, not just in pain and suffering for the individual, but in lost working days or a child having to stay out of school to look after a sick parent. And families affected like this are often living in extreme poverty. Attacks can last from several days to a couple of weeks, And people must cope with remedies like soaking the limb in cool water or taking whatever anti-inflammatories or topical medicaments that they have available. But we know that as lymphedema progresses, these acute attacks become more frequent, and each bout exacerbates the lymphedema a bit more. And this is a terrible cycle of pain and disease progression. And some sufferers have these acute episodes every few weeks. Naturally, people seek whatever remedies available to them, and traditional healers in many areas will perform scarification, which is simply making a slit in the skin in the affected area to allow the fluid to come out, which does reduce the swelling at the time, which is why they do it. But of course, that increases the risk of infection and leads to long-term scarring like this. These disfiguring diseases of hydrocele and lymphedema were the impetus behind the establishment of the global program to eliminate lymphatic filariasis as a public health problem. And since 1997, there's been a 74% reduction in global infections. And over 20 countries have been declared LF-free, which is great, but that's really only half the problem. So far, there's been a lot of progress in the annual mass drug administration of preventive chemotherapy. Now, this is what they do to kill off the parasite. And so if they dose the whole population for enough years in a row, then the worms can't survive and we'll see no new cases. Emphasis on the should see no new cases. But it is only half the job. We also have to take care of people with existing chronic disease. And this pillar is called the Morbidity Management and Disability Prevention Program, which provides an essential package of care for people with lymphedema and hydrocele. But it distresses me, particularly that in many places, mapping and surveying of the people with lymphedema gets done, so we know where the people are. But when it comes to going back and delivering primary care services, it just doesn't get there. And look, I'm not saying that the MDA is easy or that it's easy to deliver hydrocele surgery in some very challenging environments. It's taken a lot of global commitment with major donations from the drug companies and other funding bodies to achieve what's already been done. But when it comes to lymphedema, which can't be cured, which has to be managed for life, but which won't actually kill you, this part of the program really suffers from significant under-resourcing, and the so-called twin pillar is really lagging behind quite considerably. And this is partly because lymphedema doesn't have an end point. MDA has this nice end point. At some point you don't have disease transmission anymore. Hydrocele has an end point. You do the surgery, the hydrocele is cured. So you can set these definitive goals that have the promise of elimination or cure. But lymphedema doesn't have that, and it really suffers from a low clinical priority in these settings. But actually, I'm sure a lot of the Australian therapists listening will just be thinking, well, it gets a really low clinical priority in our health systems as well. And so this is the elephant in the room, and I'm not going to use the word that has been used to describe this previously. The people who have been waiting for help with their lymphedema since the beginning of the program, the people whose images were probably first used decades ago to convey the desperate need for something to do about this debilitating disease. Most of these people will not have received actually any really good advice on self-care. They've participated in the mapping surveys so that governments can allocate the necessary health resources, but they're actually still waiting for those health resources to be delivered, which is really where our work steps in with LKN. And I'm just going to clarify here, I've mentioned podoconiosis a couple of times. Podoconiosis-related lymphedema is another what's called tropical or neglected skin disease. They're frequently co-endemic, and the WHO recommends including people affected by podoconiosis in the LF program. So when a country has an LF program, they're supposed to find the podoconiosis, people with podoconiosis as well. Originally, it was only thought to be in Ethiopia, but now they think it's in something like 30 countries. Now, all of that I've shown you before, the big RCTs that we did on the Enhanced Self-Care program, That was made possible because of this really great team at Centre for Neglected Tropical Diseases at the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, where for some reason they let me conduct this really major multi-centre RCT in Bangladesh and Ethiopia. And we showed that adding some best practice self-care activities, just simple things like massage and breathing, that we've been teaching our cancer-related clients for decades. These things are not in the WHO recommendations, so we just put them in, and we showed a significant improvement over the group that was doing the standard recommendations. A lot of publications came out of that, which you can easily find. Most of them we tried to make open access. And I just really acknowledge that group, the Centre for Neglected Tropical Diseases. They were a fabulous committed group. Everything moves on, of course. We did have some excellent funding and lots of collaboration with in-country partners. And I do want to just spend a minute here thanking the LF program managers, the community health workers everywhere who are working so hard, and especially since I was there with them, they've had to deal with COVID, and some of them are now in Ethiopia, the region that we're in, now that's in civil conflict. They've really worked so hard, these local community health workers, some of them with very little background education, and they manage some quite sophisticated programs. Here's all of our health workers that helped us in Ethiopia, and I love that little photograph there of me in the health office with the picture of Haile Selassie looking at me like, I'm keeping an eye on you while you're here. You better be doing good things for my people. So I really did try and do some good things while I was there. Some of our Bangladesh research assistants. And because we'd done this big multi-centre trial, and we'd really proved our concept that if you add some massage into the program, you actually can make a difference in these. We did it on a late stage lymphedema. And so we got a contract in 2020 to take that, what we called in the enhanced care program, to Malawi, Nepal and Timor-Leste. But the global pandemic then forced a transition to digital tools. And here you see Fikre from Ethiopia taking the program to Malawi, and Saeed from Bangladesh taking the program to Nepal. And this is like a really great unexpected consequence of the pandemic, because I was always a little bit uncomfortable with this white person kind of flying in and teaching people how to do this stuff, particularly towards the end. And it's so much better if we have this kind of peer-to-peer sharing of knowledge and country-to-country sharing of knowledge. So that's a great thing that came out of the pandemic. I'm just going to move on now and just kind of give you a little bit of a rundown of the global program to eliminate lymphatic filariasis, what's in the WHO recommendations, and why we added what we did. So a little bit of an explanation of that. And you see here we're teaching this man to do his own washing. And this is very common in the global program. We teach them meticulous skincare because that helps to reduce those secondary infections. And then they give them some really very basic little exercises, just kind of rising up and down on your toes and things. And these are important, particularly in podoconiosis, where the ankles tend to fuse up. But they're not really very, they're not very exercisey. And there's a lot of focus on the hygiene aspect. So it's all about reducing the secondary infections, because this is really the cost to the community. People out of work, cost to the family in affording medicines, kids out of school. This is a real burden on the community. And there's a lot of evidence for the effectiveness of the program. We showed that it's very effective in moderate severe stages. I'm sure that if we could do the same program in early stages, that we'd find that we could perhaps reverse some of the very early lymphedema. And it is definitely worth doing. There's been some economic modelling done that shows that the return, if the amount that it costs to establish a good program for your people with lymphedema in your community, you will get that back 100-fold. That whatever it cost you to establish that clinic or that service, you're going to get it back into the community 100 times because of the devastating effect that it has on people's ability to work. So get them back into work, get them included back into social activities, and everything for the community improves as well. Okay, so what's missing then, and what did we add? Really anything to support the lymph system to recover function and work better. So we just added those core principles that you would expect to see in any kind of lymphatic therapy. So clearing the proximal system first, and then doing some work with the large proximal skeletal muscles. And we also added something to really try and address connective tissue changes and try and get those damaged lymph vessels to recover working properly. So we added simple things like diaphragmatic breathing just to clear that thoracic duct and bring everything up to the subclavian vein. We wanted them to do walking. We got them to do big muscle skeletal pumps. People that weren't quite as well abled, we taught them how to do floor exercises to try and empty that upper part of their limb. And then we could work on the lower part of the limb with skin and tissue mobilization and some lymphatic massage. So here I am in Bangladesh teaching deep breathing. Dr. Kausal there is interpreting for me, and we're explaining it to them like a water pump. They understand a water pump, that you pump the handle and that lifts the water out of the ground. So we're talking about lifting the fluid from their lower body into their upper body. And here we've got Wandai in Ethiopia demonstrating the large skeletal muscle exercises to empty out the upper part of the leg. And then Saeed in Bangladesh, who's showing how a caregiver can help lift the leg and help those exercises to happen even if someone can't walk around or do the exercises for themselves. We taught them some very simple skin mobilization and lymphatic massage techniques. We conveyed that principle of the proximal clearing, and then using tissue mobilization, using the just a bit of energy, of putting energy and movement into the tissue to soften things up, and then just using effleurage type movements to help try and get some fluid up into more functioning lymphatics up at the top of the leg. One of the things that the global program suffers from is this kind of Western hierarchical model of healthcare, where we really favour high-cost, high-value diagnostic tools and therapies that have to be performed by specially trained health professionals. But this kind of really top-down medical paradigm often results in terrible inequality for the end user. And, you know, our latest, discoveries in lymphatic imaging and therapy are not helping this guy who's carrying around an army of flies with him because nobody has even taught him how to properly wash his feet. And possibly his family can't even afford the extra bar of soap that it would need anyway. So this is where the LKN Foundation comes in. We're developing user-friendly, open-access, shareable instruction videos, which we aim to place directly into the hands of the people that need them. Post-pandemic, the acceptability and availability of digital devices is expanding exponentially, and this offers us a really effective and low-cost means to disseminate lymphedema, self-care information and training, and we can get to even the most remote communities and leave no one behind if we're just leaving them with digital information.